What's going on, everybody? This is Richard Hake, aka the Hawk, with the Prospect Pod, powered by the Weekly Streamer. We are back again for another week of breaking down different system breakdowns. And this week we are going to be breaking down the Kansas City Royals, a farm system that has been fun to be able to look at the last couple of years, and it's changed quite a bit. We'll be able to get into that here in just a little bit, but we do want to do some housekeeping here. Make sure that you check out the Weekly Streamer Facebook group page. We have tons of great conversations going on there, comments dropping left and right on all sorts of different topics, whether it's prospect knowledge, joining into different leagues, asking questions about some guys to target in some of your dynasty leagues. It's a great forum to be able to be a part of. Of course, you can check out the brand new Weekly Streamer Patreon page. There you can actually find the full write-up here for the Kansas City Royals system. If you are on our Facebook page, you've already seen 1 through 5, which is fantastic. But we do a write-up that goes 1 through 10. And then, of course, 11 through 30 is ranked out on there. And it's a great breakdown of this system. Do want to welcome a new patron this week. We got Sean joining us here on Patreon, and we are absolutely thankful to have you, sir, and hope that you are enjoying the perks of being on Patreon. If you guys don't already know, you can see all of our rankings, top 500 dynasty rankings, 600 plus prospect rankings. Your boy the Hawk's going to hook you up. Of course, you can see our first-year player draft breakdowns for 2021 and 22. I got to start saying it that way, not 2020. So you got those on there. We have the full breakdowns that are on Patreon. Great articles written by Matty Ballgame whenever it comes down to pitching breakdowns, as well as a few other of our writers here at the Weekly Streamer. There's an awesome write-up on there right now for Ron Darling from back in the day with Yale, done by Jake Johnson. Wonderful piece that you guys can go and check out. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter. You can follow me directly at Must Be the Hawk. I'm posting things on Instagram and Twitter constantly, so give me a follow on there, and you're sure to enjoy the content that we put on there. I'm going to go ahead and bring in my guest because I'm excited. Just got to be honest, I'm really excited every time I get a chance to be able to have this guy on my podcast. It's always a win, right? I'm talking about Matty Ballgame. This guy, Beard Game Based. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing good, man. Assuming a win every single time is not that great. My batting average is like Joey Gallo levels, so
that's not true.
No, it is. No need to set expectations too high.
I don't know, man. We were killing it in some softball league. The 1 or 2 games that we played together.
Yeah, we did. I went out with a bang because when it come to the playoffs, I was that dude. Kind of saved all my bullets for that that one doubleheader.
That's what it is. And our boy Lee, he didn't believe in me and my abilities at second base, so had to help you cover the outfield.
Well, confession, I was so terrible that even in a men's softball league for guys who are like 30, they put me a DH only.
Blanco Poppy. That's why he's got the name. That's why.
It was terrible. It was terrible. I remember the one play where I found out my vertical was exactly 3.8 inches.
It was pretty impressive. Pretty darn impressive.
I do hope it's changed at this point, though.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, oddly enough, I was a fantastic basketball player. Nope.
Nobody would have known.
And I have no credentials to back that up.
Nope. And any of you who follow us on TikTok, you've already seen I have great basketball skills.
There you go.
Globetrotters.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, you can see it. It's right on there. For those of you who are watching us actually right now on YouTube or on the Facebook page after the fact, you will be seeing that Matty Ballgame and myself are repping these awesome Pitching Ninja t-shirts that we just got in. It's all in support for our great friend Emily Walden, a writer that has just really influenced us in a lot of different ways, and a lot of folks around the industry as a whole. We're very, very grateful and thankful to her for her knowledge that she's been able to spread to us all these years. And now to be able to help support her, Pitching Ninja teamed up with her to create these Emily's Fight T-shirts, which are really awesome, really comfortable. All the proceeds for this limited edition Pitching Ninja shirt will be donated directly to our friends Emily Walden to support her on her battle against breast cancer. And she is always in our thoughts, our prayers, of course. And you guys at the streamer have been so great in terms of your responses to this whenever we did post this on the page. And Matty Ballgame was actually the one that ended up posting it on there first. And very grateful that he did. I went ahead and grabbed a couple shirts and tell you, going forward, I'm going to be having these on whenever I'm podcasting. So shout out to Emily Walden there.
Yeah, Emily, she's always been extremely sweet. Her and I, we haven't had a whole lot of personal interaction, but I've seen the way she interacts with people on her, her Facebook and people who are fans of hers. And she's always been very nice and very sweet. And she's a fellow writer, and we wanted to make sure that we came out in droves and to support her in whatever way we can, big or small. And so, we're behind you, Emily, in every step of the way through your fight.
Absolutely. And if you guys want to get yours, go on to rotoware.com. $28 a shirt, and I tell you, they're worth it. Great quality shirts too. Really, really like these. And this is a limited time release, so they're not going to have it on there all the time. Like I said, all proceeds go towards Emily Walden there and support. And it looks like you can end up doing your pre-order by January 23rd is what they're saying on their website. Of course, Maddie, Ballgame, and myself, we went ahead and ordered ours, and they're already here. So, get your orders in. They're awesome. Great cause too.
Well worth
Absolutely. So, Matt, I do want to talk to you a little bit here about the system that you did right up here in the Kansas City Royals. You and I actually last season did the Kansas City Royals write up system together. It seems like so long ago at this point.
It really does.
Yeah. So I think it's pretty cool that, I did the write up last year. You're doing it this year. So let me ask you this: compared to how we talked about it last year, what do you think about this system as a whole? We'll break it down, but what do you think of it as a whole and where it's going forward?
Well, I think they have a lot. I think they have a lot that are right there at the major league level, which is good because they're looking to turn that corner. But one of the things you'll see through my system write up is although they have those, 21, 22, 23, 24 year olds that are pushing towards the majors and are going to make that next leap in the coming season, most likely all of them, you're going to see that there's also a lot of really, really young talent, like 17, 18, 19 year olds that are a ways away that you could see coming as they develop. You could see them coming and continuing that push to make them long-term perennial contenders for not just, the playoffs, their division, but honestly, World Series at this point. There is a ton of talent throughout the system. I'd go so far as to say that the talent really goes from 1 to 21 and 22 in the rankings of the system. And I don't think it was quite as deep last year when we went into it.
No, not as much. I mean, it was more so, I think, on the pitching side because we were still.
Yeah, it was extremely deep with the arms.
Yeah, because I think last year, if I remember correctly, Singer might or might not have been in there, but I do know that, Coar, Lynch, Bubik, they were ones that we were talking about. Bolin was another one that we were kind of, getting on last year as well. So, I mean, one or two of those names are still somewhat in this system, but for the most part, I mean, there's a lot of new names, fresh faces, and that's pretty encouraging. I think seeing some of that talent get to the major leagues is going to take a little time to develop, and we still got a lot in here. And just like you were talking about, a little bit on the younger side, so really sustained.
Well, I think the reemergence of a couple guys and the emergence of one or two guys is really going to propel this system to a new level. And ultimately, what you're going to see is there's a lot of same old with them. They have a lot of copycat players as far as their overall profile to either what they have in the majors or, a guy standing right next to or right behind them that can perform almost identically. And it's a good problem to have because it gives you tradable depth, but also it gives you options. If a guy flounders or he struggles at that next level, it makes it easy to say, hey, take a step back, go back down. We've got another guy who can come up and take your place. It's kind of, Rick, the philosophy that you go for in fantasy quite a bit, and that's that next man up philosophy. And if you look through, a lot of the organizations that have perennial success, like, and I know you hate this, but the St. Louis Cardinals, it's always that next man up mentality. And this system is, in my opinion, a reflection of exactly that.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely a system that's on the rise, and we'll get into it, with this whole write up. But I mean, you see a lot of positional flexibility. They have a type.
A ton, and they do have a type, but there is a lot of there's a sliding scale at every position, from one guy who's in the majors now in Kyle Isbell, to an almost identical replica in the minors of him.
Yeah.
So
no,
and that's just one example of that mold that they're tending to trend towards.
absolutely, absolutely. So hey, I'm excited to be able to dive into it, and of course, we can't really start this without first mentioning, if you guys haven't seen it already, we put a little promo video this week of our boy Ryan and Koviak. You guys know him as Mr. Late Night, Johnny Carson himself. But yeah, he did a great job on it, and I tell you, the first time Matt and I are truck drivers by trade, and one of the first times that I ended up driving through Missouri to be able to get to Kansas City, I remember driving by Kauffman Stadium. I have to tell this story because
I was on the phone
I think
for
it's
this.
hilarious. So I'm driving by Kauffman Stadium. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's Kauffman Stadium. There's the Chiefs, stadium's right there as well. Arrowhead Stadium. And
Arrowhead, yeah.
I'm just like, man, this is cool. And I was like, wait a second. I'm still in Missouri. Isn't this Kansas City? And Matt is a Midwestern guy, and all of you who are listening,
I'm from St.
I was
Louis.
going to say, all of you who are Midwestern types, you're probably laughing at me and my East Coast knowledge of this. And Ryan in that video was absolutely hilarious, whether intentional or not, I don't know. But yeah, you were on the phone for that, weren't you, Matt?
Yeah, I was, and I'm like, yeah, it's literally on the border.
For those of you who don't know, Kansas City is divided right down the middle by the river. So
right down the middle.
Yeah, same with St. Louis, by the way, if you didn't know.
It is in fact, and we actually had a discussion about that amongst the moderators yesterday. Is that there were several cities exactly like St. Louis, Kansas City, Memphis, that it's so close to the borders right there that it actually sits in two different states.
Absolutely. So no, I had to make mention of that. It's a good laugh. Anyway,
Mr. Antoinacci found that out yesterday.
He's gonna love listening back to that.
He is. Just remember, Ryan, all caps.
It's all caps. All caps,
all
baby.
Caps.
All caps. That's what we do here.
Yeah,
all caps. Anyway, Matt, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get into your first guy that's here in this system write up. And honestly, this is a fan favorite of the page, pretty much across the industry. If you're not a fan of him, well, then just get out. Just get out.
If you don't love him, you don't love baseball.
Okay.
So, our first prospect here on your write-up today is Mr. Bobby Witt Jr. Bobby Witt Jr. is 21 years old, 6 foot, 200 pounds. He was taken second overall in the first round of the 2019 draft by the Kansas City Royals out of high school. Matt, what can you tell me about Bobby Witt that we don't already know, or what we can expect coming into 2022?
Well, I think the Royals took a guy who had very few questions, and I think the only question that really could have been asked about Bobby Witt at the time was, how developed was his bat, and I think he answered those questions not so much in his debut, but during the alt site for the COVID season, but also coming into 2021, where he got a relatively aggressive assignment given that he hadn't played any competitive ball in a year. And he got AA, and he split his year perfectly down the middle between AA and AAA. 61 games at AA, 62 games at AAA. And the kid absolutely balled out. We're talking a 290 average, a 359 OBP, a near 30-30 season with 33 home runs, 29 stolen bases, and had that last game, Rick, you and I did some digging into this. Had this last game not been not ruled an official game, he would have had a 30-30
Yep.
season. And I know that's something he was chasing after.
He
And there's
achieved it.
really
He achieved it. Don't
well,
take that away from him.
we're going to give it to him at the streamer. But you can't really say anything that's not already known about Bobby Witt. But I was actually pulling it up as you were, going through your intro. Rick, I don't know if you know this or not, but he didn't have a single triple in AAA, which is, I know it's an odd thing to bring up, but what really kind of sparked me to look is he more than doubled his doubles as he moved to AAA, which, you already know that Bobby Witt's got power, but now it leads you to believe, or it leads you to question, how much more power is in this young kid's body? Because at 61 games at AA, which you and I both know that the pitching is, these last couple of years has been better at AA, but 24 doubles versus 11 at AA versus AAA is a tremendous jump. I mean, we're talking his total extra base hits for last year, 72 extra base hits into 130 or 123 games. I mean, it really gets you excited for what he can do at the next level. They haven't had this level of power outside of Sal Perez this past season since Moose's breakout seasons in Kauffman Stadium. And it really gives you some hope that they found, for better or for worse, their Chipper Jones. I mean, this guy has every single tool imaginable, and I think although Nicky Lopez seems to be entrenched in that shortstop role just because he's a defensive shortstop, I think they're going to fight tooth and nail to push him into a third base or any role they have to get him onto the field. Streamers, don't let the presence of a Hunter Dozier or a Nicky Lopez deter you from either acquiring him or holding on to him. Because this talent is going to far exceed what they currently have. I could go through the numbers, ad nauseum, and Rick, you and I have, but there's nothing I need to say. He is a bona fide superstar, to the caliber of Trey Turner, Francisco Lindor. He is going to be a bona fide superstar, and I don't think there's a single question about that.
No, I agree with that 100%. You look at these numbers, and like you said, I mean, they're carbon copies of each other from AA to AAA, literally. I mean, they're separated by
improved
barely anything except for exactly what you said with those doubles.
Improved strikeout rate. He got better as he moved up. Identical walk rate. The BABIP was not anything ridiculous to make you believe that his numbers are unsustainable. They're something you would associate with a guy who has speed as an element of his game. And really, honestly, his BABIP for a guy who has the level of speed that he has and his ability to move, they're actually relatively low in AAA.
Yeah.
Which led to the 285 average at AAA.
Literally went down 10 points. And you look at the fact that he had 10 more at bats, comparatively speaking, than what he did at AA. 10 more runs, 11 more runs. And like I said, I mean, like you said, I mean, a good 12, 13 more doubles. I mean, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And you're right. I mean, Bobby Witt is just a guy who goes out there and gets it done, and I really think that there'll be a good chance that he'll either crack the majors, right out the gates, depending on how the CBA turns out, or if worst case scenario, I think he maybe starts the year and does a month down in AAA and then comes on up, and I don't think he'll ever go back.
Once the CBA is done and over with, I think the Chris Bryant days of manipulating that stuff is going to be over, because that's the biggest sticking point for a lot of players is that service time manipulation. So I can say, from what I think, you can almost bank on him. He's going to be the everyday shortstop or the everyday third baseman for the Kansas City Royals for the beginning of the 2022 season.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Moving on to your next prospect that you do have here. This is a guy that really kind of, he's been known in prospect circles for a while. Really kind of put it together this year. Exploded onto the scene. Deserves this high ranking that he's getting right now. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into it. Your second prospect that's on your list here is Nick Pratto. He's a first baseman, 23 years old. 6'1", 215 pounds. He was taken in the first round of the 2017 draft, 14th overall by the Kansas City Royals. What can you tell me about Nick Prado?
Well, I don't want to look just at his 2021 season because 2021 really represented a reemergence for him or a return to what they thought he could be when he was drafted as early as what he was. I want to take back to what made him forgotten. And Rick, you and I have seen this happen with some of these younger guys, the Vidal Bruhans and Jaron Durans of the world, where they will take a step up to that next level, and there will be an expected performance level, and they don't achieve that, and for whatever reason, they're written off so quickly. And I think Nick Prado is a victim of that because if you look at his 2020 or his 2019 season, obviously 2020 was missed due to the COVID season. He played 124 games. Well, he had a 34.7% strikeout rate, but the two numbers that stand out the most with that, well, three really, are only 9 home runs, uh, a 191 average, and a 278 OBP. I'm sorry, that those kind of numbers don't play at first base. They don't play at DH, and due to his lack of mobility to a degree, those are his only two options. He may be able to get stuck at a corner outfield occasionally, but he's a true first baseman. And I'm sorry, but those numbers don't translate. They don't play in the major leagues unless you're Joey Gallo and you're able to crank 50 bombs just off standing at the plate. Well, 2021 really represented a return to what they thought he could be because you're talking about a first baseman. And Rick, everybody knows the only way you play at first is you've got to be able to put the ball over the fence. Right. And when you look at his 2021 numbers, you're talking 36 home runs. You're talking let's say right at, sorry, I don't have his cumulative stats because I always tend to lean towards Fangraph, but you're looking at roughly about a 265 average. You're looking at extra base hits of, let's see, 36, 40, 43, 71 extra base hits over that time. And those are the numbers that you're really looking forward to seeing. And, I don't know how well this will translate. Me and the Biscuit have gone back and forth on this quite a bit when it comes to speed and how speed translates up. But he was able to steal 12 bases last year on 17 attempts. So it makes you wonder if that's going to translate. He could give you kind of some Goldschmidt-esque vibes as far as being able to put a little bit of stolen bases on the board from a position that you generally just never, ever get production out of on the base pass. But I think what we're looking at here is the everyday first baseman, and it'll happen relatively soon for years to come with the Royals. And he's going to be that Hosmer-esque guy who's going to be able to just muscle the ball over the fence. I think his power potential is higher, even with the Kaufman effect, than what Hosmer gave. So I think you can kind of expect a Moose-style player out of him. You know what you're going to get every year. It's not going to be anything that is going to really bust down the doors for any guys at first base. But I think you can expect whenever he hits the majors every year, kind of a, 28 to 33 home run guy, a 260 to 270 average on his best years. But just a guy that you draft in that 4, 5, 6 range in redraft leagues, you just put him there and you forget that he's there.
Yeah, that's what it kind of seems like to me. You're about right on that 265, 270 average. 30 bombs. I could see it. It's tricky to be able to look at because he didn't come anywhere close to this prior to this season in terms of home run output. 14 home runs was his career high prior to that. But if he's able to get to that 25, 30 home run rate, even though he hit 36 this year, I think that's really, really good to be able to get from the first base spot there. A little bit of speed definitely helps. I mean, he had 7 triples on the season as well as a first baseman. That's pretty darn impressive. I think you're right. I think, a 350, 360 OBP is probably going to where he's going to lie. The 404 OBP that he had earlier in AA, that was just crazy. But he had a really, really good season. You saw him come down to earth a little bit in AAA with the batting average. Some of the numbers came back down a little bit, but nothing to be majorly concerned about. I do like Nick Prado in this spot. I'm cautious I will say more so than anything in terms of, the first base prospects that are available right now whenever it comes to Prado. I know a lot of folks are just completely buying into it. I'm not going to say that I'm completely there, but I do
Mhm.
like the profile that we're seeing so far.
Well, before we move on, Rick, the only thing that gives me pause with him is we just stated how the difference in pitching the pitching is definitely more advanced because you have a lot of quad A guys that just get stuck and washed in and out of AAA. The one or two things that kind of give me pause with him, and really honestly, I guess I could say three, is his walk rate
Hmm.
dropped, his strikeout rate dropped, which is a positive
Yeah.
thing, but it almost makes you wonder if he was pressing just a little bit because he got that next step closer to the majors. He started to hit for more power. As he had more doubles, he had more home runs. His batting average dropped. He had more strike. He had about the same level of strikeouts, but he started to walk
Yeah.
less. So I that would be the only thing that would give me pause. I think you kind of know what you've got, and you know that he's knocking on the door with Prado. You just want to be careful to not to overpay. If you can, you know, if you can get somebody to in negotiations to acknowledge that this is probably his best cumulative season across those two levels, and he's going to settle, a little bit lower, and you can get him for that range, he's worth the price that you're going to pay. But if you're paying that 36 home run, or you're paying, what you're paying for the season that he had, like the next guy we're going to talk about, you're going to be sorely disappointed. It's going to come back to burn you. You've got to find that happy medium in his performance last year and his actual performance of what it's going to be, because he's likely going to be an 11% walk rate guy, a 30+% strikeout rate guy.
Hmm.
And that's really going to hamper his value if he's not cranking Alonso style home runs, which we don't expect out of him.
Right. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Moving on to your next prospect here. It's your number three prospect, Matt, and it's another one of these guys that I feel like really popped up in the system. He's getting a lot of love around the industry, a lot of pub. Whether it's warranted or not, we'll kind of get into that. But I'm talking about MJ Melendez, 23 years old, 6'1", 190 pounds. He was taken in the second round of the 2017 draft, same draft as Prado, who's taken the next round, 52nd overall. What can you tell me about MJ Melendez and this resurgence that we've seen?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Prior to the end of the 2021 season, I had absolutely no clue who MJ Melendez was. And I think that's going to be, I don't know if it speaks to lack of my knowledge of the Royal system or just how out of nowhere he came. But I think you're going to find more often than not in prospect circles, um, nobody knew who this kid was, because prior to his 2021 season, in 111 games in 2018 at 19 years old, he had 19 home runs. He had a 30% strikeout rate. He had a 251 average. He had a 322 OBP. Which are fair numbers. But the only thing about that would really stand out would have been the fact that he was a catcher putting up those kind of
Mm-hmm.
numbers. I think the 41 home runs is something that really pops off the page. If you go in and you start to look at some of his other numbers, his OBP collectively last year was sitting at about that 392, 393 range. He had a strikeout rate of, right at about 21.5%, which is incredible. He had a walk rate that sat right at about 14%, which, makes you excuse me. It makes you believe that maybe he made an adjustment at the alt site it really propelled him with the bat. It's just a matter of how much you can believe in it. 41 home runs is a tremendous jump in relatively close to about the same amount of games from 19.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be maturation. It could be a swing adjustment. He may be getting underneath the ball a little bit more. It really just leads you to kind of question where that came from. He had a total of 22 doubles. He had three triples, and so I can see where a lot of people would believe in it. And Rick, you and I have talked about Melendez. Do we believe in it? It's really a coin toss at this point, and I don't know what direction to point the streamers in. Long term, he is blocked at catcher, as Salvador Perez did sign an extension this year, and his performance has Melendez style, looks to it. So I think ultimately he's going to become a DH until Salvador Perez is moved, either to DH, or his contract runs out, and then Melendez will probably take over there. Um, but I really don't know what to make of the guy. I think he's ranked this high based off one, proximity, and two, performance in 2021. But some of his profile says that it's believable, it's sustainable. But then you go back, to the previous seasons, and a 30.3% strikeout rate, 30.3 again, 39.4, and these are not small sample sizes. These, you're talking 111 games in 18, 110 in 20. You're talking about his power rate dropping off from 18 to 19. So, and then you're talking about that 163 average in 19 that really just kind of makes you go, ugh. It gives you that reason to pause. So, the only thing I can really say, and Rick, I know I've kind of, gone on about this. The only thing I can really say is proceed with caution with Melendez. If you're invested in him at this point, you probably didn't spend that much to get him. I would caution anyone against moving forward and grabbing him at the price that he's likely going to cost you know, because of what he could be if he maintains that catcher eligibility. The price is going to be astronomical because that level of production is not available anywhere. Even with the best of the best in Salvador Perez and JT Realmuto, you just don't get that style of production. I would hesitate against buying him at the cost he'll be. But if you're in already, ride this out or sell high and see if you can get a king's ransom for him.
Yeah, I mean these are video game numbers, no matter how you kind of look at it. I mean, 103 RBIs, closest RBI season he had prior to this was 73. You know, he had 13 more games played than in 2019, I believe, and he cut down his strikeouts by 50 strikeouts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, there's obviously mechanical adjustments here. It happens, but this is, to me, a major red flag. If you have them,
Mm-hmm.
great, shop them, see what you can do. I don't know if I'm going out and acquiring this because I don't know if I'm going to want to give up what these numbers are, and they're fantastic. Nothing to take away
It's
from him.
difficult to see that. Yeah, it's a difficult to see that return on investment at this current,
Yeah,
price of which he's going to have to be moved. It's the same with like Gabriel
mm-hmm.
Moreno, or Francisco Alvarez. At this point, you've probably missed the boat on them if you're not already in
Oh,
on
I agree, and I just don't know if that cost is something that I really want to chase after. Like I said, I mean,
them.
fantastic year for him. Definitely not taking anything away from him on that, but yeah, I would just proceed with caution. Is really all that I can
Hmm.
kind of say on there. Um, we're
Hmm.
gonna move on to your number 5 prospect here, and this is a guy. If you guys listen to the prospect pod this past year, you've heard this name before a couple times on some of the later pods. This is Vinny Pascantino. He's 24 years old, 6'4", 245 pounds. He's a big boy. 29 drafted in 2019 in the 11th round, 319th overall by Kansas City. Matt, what can you tell me about Vinny Pascantino?
So Pascatino, prior to me doing the Royals write up, and he was a name that I had heard float, who had been floated around. I don't even know if that's proper terminology, but who his name has been, discussed amongst the moderators at the streamer. And excuse me, I can't get rid of this cough tonight. Um, it's a name that had, been out there. Well, I knew nothing about the kid prior to this, just because I had gotten kind of reintroduced to things. Um, but after reading this, it was extremely difficult for me not to take him and just go ahead and throw him right behind Bobby Witt. And you and I actually discussed that, and you kind of gave me that that pause whenever I had mentioned I was going to do that. But this kid is the absolute truth. He's made 3 stops, and I'm pretty sure he was at the alt site. Um, but he's made 3 stops. And Rick, do you know what his lowest walk percentage is over those 3 stops?
Um,
10.9%
yeah, I was gonna say I
at
knew it was pretty
rookie
darn
ball.
good.
Yeah, and it's only gotten better from there as the competition has gone up at high 12%. And this is the part that really gets me is at double A, where we've already discussed his competition goes up significantly, 13.1%. And that's like, I'm already banging the drum for that because it lets you know he's got a good eye at the plate. It lets you know he's patient, lets you know he's not going to chase a whole lot. But Rick, what really, really pushes this guy over the top for me and has me to the point where I'm going to pay whatever you ask for him is his strikeout rate has done the exact opposite. His strikeout rate at rookie ball, which was 57 games, which is a respectable sample size to begin pulling things from, 16.1%, which far beats out anything that both Melendez and Prado have done to this point. And that's at rookie ball. And so you go to the next level, which is high A, 13.8%. It's already got me excited for that. Then he goes to double A. 55 games at double A, 11% strikeout rate. And his BABIP is right at league average. It's the kind of BABIP that lets you know that speed is not a part of his game, and therefore it's not affecting it. This is all pure luck and skill that's going into this. And this kid's average across his 3 levels, 294, 291, 310. And the OBP has done nothing but climb the entire way. And it has me extremely excited. I don't think he possesses Melendez, the 2021 Melendez style power, but I think what you're looking at here is the kind of video game-esque numbers that in terms of his percentages that made a player like Pujols great. It's because he never had a ridiculous strikeout rate. He was always feared in the box, and the dude could take a walk. He was okay with just grabbing one base. And if you ever hear Pujols talk, Pujols never described himself as a home run guy. He was always a line drive guy. And when you sit here, and I understand it's lofty comparisons, and I'm not making that comparison at all. When you look here at Vinny Pasquantino's numbers at 6'4", 245, a left-handed bat who can put up 24 home runs across 116 games and strike out at a less than 12% clip, that's got to get you excited.
Oh, yeah. No, it definitely does. And, you look at these numbers. We were talking about Prado here, and he had 28 doubles, I believe is what we ended up saying, 28 doubles. Pasquantino has 37 doubles. Like, the power that's still in there is still something that can be able to come out. And, I really, really, really like Pasquantino. And quite frankly, I mean, I don't want to throw another, what could be perceived as a ridiculous comp, but this reminds me of another first baseman that is out on the market right now in free agency. And I hate to say it.
Frederick?
Yes, Freddie Freeman. This looks to me like a Freddie Freeman type of player. High OBP, solid bat, a 310 average, at double A, a 291 in high A. I mean, the guy knows how to hit rookie ball 294. The guy's never batted below 290 in his time as a pro.
Well, Rick, I'm going to throw 2 things out there. In 2021, 64 strikeouts, 64 walks. So you're talking about a guy whose profile fits perfectly right there between Joey Votto and Freddie Freeman.
That's so scary.
And this, he's a thick boy. Rick, I like big boys.
Can't lie.
And this right here has me beyond excited. I'm telling you, if anybody in any league that I'm in comes to me and says, "Do you have interest in Pasquantino?" The answer is yes! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Name your price. Take my money.
Oh my gosh! Yes, I'm with it 100%. This is arguably one of my favorite guys in the system, which is very difficult to say with Bobby Witt because Bobby Witt clearly is a generational type of talent. So
Absolute stud. But see, here's the issue. And Rick, I won't continue to go on, but I kind of alluded to this in the opening part of, the show, in talking about how you have carbon copies and you're going to have a logjam at the position. So Melendez is likely going to sit at
mhm,
DH. Nick Prado is going to be entrenched at first base. Um, Vinny Pasquantino is 24 years
mhm,
old. Nick Prado is 22, 23 years old. Melendez is in that same age range. There's only one first base and one DH spot with catcher being blocked. So it makes you wonder what the Royals are planning to do, because you already have Hunter Dozier. You already have um, Alberto Mondesi. You already have Nicky Lopez. You've got Bobby Witt. Your infield is already full.
mhm.
You don't have a place for a lot of these guys to play. So I'm very curious. And Pasquantino has played 55 games at Double A. He's likely going to start at Triple A, and if he doesn't, he's only going to play about 20 games at Double A, and that's really just to slow play him to figure out what they've got in Prado. And he's going to be at Triple A, and then he's going to be banging that door. If this performance continues, and all statistical indicators is that this is who he is, this is what you can expect. It's, I mean, he's going to be banging on that door.
Mhm.
So it makes you kind of wonder, what they're going to do between Dozier, Witt, Pasquantino, Prado, Melendez, and Perez. And they have a good problem because you can move one of these guys and get a bona fide star for some of these players.
Yeah, you totally could. And with the little bit of speed that Prado brings, you might be able
Mm-hmm.
to put them in the corner outfield spot. I mean, I know a lot of folks
Mm-hmm.
want them to stick it first, but
Reese Hoskins.
yeah,
Reese
Reese
Hoskins.
Hoskins, Lucas Duda moved from the outfield to first base. Not that you
Mm-hmm.
really want to hear that comp, but I'm just saying, there's a chance that he could move there. Pasquantino, I
Well,
don't think can make it in the outfield just because he just
no,
doesn't have that kind of mobility.
he's
He is a
big.
big boy, so
Yeah.
I think first base or DH is really going to be where he's going to
Well,
be.
Cody Bellinger.
Mhm.
Cody Bellinger is another one of those. He's moved back and forth between the two.
Mountcastle as well,
Yep,
Trey
Mountcastle.
Mancini. So
Yeah,
we've
and
seen
so
it.
they've got a good problem to try to figure out on their hands, and it makes you excited for their future going forward. But it also makes you kind of pause because it makes you wonder if they're going to slow play a guy like Pasquantino if he can't just overall outperform Prado. And if Prado comes up and struggles and Pasquantino's sitting up there mashing the ball or just getting on base at a ridiculous clip like he's already shown that he can do, there's a good chance that they move off Prado pretty quickly and put Pasquantino in that infield.
I can get behind it. Number 5 on your list here is a guy that I think a lot of folks would expect to be higher up on this list, but
I would
yeah,
have
yeah, same
higher than
here.
this.
But I think that you have him appropriately ranked based on what we've been talking about. That is Asa Lacy. He's a left-handed pitcher, 22 years old, 6'4", 215 pounds. He was taken in the first round of the 2020 draft with the 4th overall pick by the Kansas City Royals. Matt, what can you tell me about Asa Lacy, or what they call Ace?
Well, Rick, you know I'm a big arm guy. I mean, that's just what that's my thing. Um, Asa Lacy is a guy who I absolutely fell in love with coming into the draft. He was a guy that in some parts you've had to kind of talk me down on because I would have taken him pretty high in a first year player draft. 6'4", 215 pounds. He's got a starter's build. He's got 3+ pitches in his fastball, his slider, his curveball. He's got a pitch in his changeup that can flash plus at times. And the only negative against him going into some of his grades was his command was a bit shaky at times. And unfortunately, that's the thing he showed us in the 2021 season. A 7.1% or a 7.1 walks per 9 is absolutely nauseating for a guy that you took with the 4th overall pick with the expectation he was going to be your ace, your bona fide ace of staff without question. And so, whenever I saw that walk rate was that high, I pulled up his numbers at Texas A&M, and he split exactly half his time between starting and relieving. And I'm curious as to if they did that to protect him or they're still trying to figure out his figure out what to do with him, or if they were trying to figure out what to do with him, and his stuff was just so good that they were forced to put him into the rotation. He had a walks per nine of 4, with a strikeout rate of 13.3 at Texas A&M. So, you know, it kind of gives me pause, and that's the reason, despite all of his ability and all of his talent, you can have all that in the world, but if you don't know where the ball is going, that's not going to go well. And this kid he's a bulldog on the mound. You look at his ERA down there at Texas A&M, it was 2.07. That is absolutely incredible. He only allowed 2.61 runs per nine. Uh, it just, you know, it leads you to question what's about to happen with Lacey. And my fear, honestly, there's two fears with Lacey, and you and I have discussed this with the Royal system. What is their true ability to get the most out of Arms? And how far into his development, how far into his way of doing things is he? Is he past the point where he can be coached? Or to where he's willing to take it. And there's no rumors of that. It just gives me pause with them. Asa Lacy, I believe the talent is absolutely there. But right now, if you look solely based off his college numbers and his 1 year at high A, where he made 14 starts and that spanned 52 innings, it kind of looks Luis Gil, is it Francisco Morales for the Phillies? It looks, vaguely like them. He's just older. So, although I do still believe the talent is there and this can be corrected, it gives you pause on paying those premium prices. If you're in, you're already in at a pretty hefty price tag with them. But if you're not in, or if you're buying them, you're not gonna get, what am I trying to say here? It gives you pause to buy in at this point, because that looks rough. I mean, he was sporting a 5.19 ERA now, and I know I'm kind of going on about this, Rick. There was one saving grace, and that was the 4 appearances across 7 2/3 innings at the Arizona Fall League, where he was able to sport a 2.35 ERA. He struck out 15 batters, and he only faced 33, so he struck out nearly 50% of what he faced. His walks per nine was still at 7. Strikeouts was 17.6. So, can he get the job done? Yeah. But those walks have got to be corrected, man.
Yeah, they definitely do need to be corrected. So we'll see what happens with Asa Lacy going into the 2022 season. We're going to take a quick break, and whenever we get back here, we're going to jump into the rest of Matty Ballgame's awesome Kansas City Royals system breakdown. Stay tuned. All right, and we are back. We're going to continue going into this system breakdown here of the Kansas City Royals, and we're moving right along to the next prospect that you have here on your list, Matt. It is going to be Ben Kunra. He is a right-handed pitcher, 18 years old, 6'3", 175 pounds, taken in the second round of the 2021 draft with the 43rd pick by the Kansas City Royals. What do you see here in Kunra?
Well, the thing about Kunra that kind of gets me, and really, I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit, Rick. Frank Mazzucato is my number 7, and Kunra, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name there. It's these two guys give me pause, not because of their ability, because of what we just alluded to. They're both 18 years old. The Royals haven't been able to develop or push any of their arms to that next level. And so at 18 years old, there's still a lot of development in these prep arms. They've got the body, they've got the ability. Kudrina is sitting at, he's 6'3", 203 pounds, and he's already touching 97 miles an hour with his fastball. And the secondary stuff is lagging behind just a little bit, but that's to be expected with a lot of the majority arms. But that is what is the difference between a bullpen arm and a bona fide ace, a guy who goes out there and he can really take that next, be the guy who, if you're on a 4 game losing streak, we're going to send this guy out here. He's likely going to end this losing streak for us. And with that's what gives me pause with these next two guys. The same thing that gave me pause with Lacey is they're a long way away. And do the Royals possess the technology and the coaching ability to take the most out of these guys? And I know I'm kind of consolidating 6 and 7 here a bit, but the difference between Kudrina and Mazzucato is Mazzucato's calling card is his secondary
Mhm.
stuff. So it makes you wonder with Kudrina, can they develop his secondary stuff? And with Mazzucato, can they get enough out of him on the velocity side to play up his already amazing curveball? He's already been able to do some pretty incredible things, you know, in his time in high school as he threw 4 consecutive no hitters, and that's what really caused him to pop on the map. Um, but it just makes you wonder, can the Royals do this with these young arms? Because you and I have discussed this. They have not been able to do it with the college arms that they've drafted. Bubik, Kowar, Singer, and I'm missing another one here.
And
Lynch.
Lynch. And Lynch
Lynch.
had a
And those.
fantastic year, I believe, earlier this year, in which that he was
Mhm.
striking out a ton of batters, got the call up to the majors, and completely flopped. So
And Kowar did the exact same thing. Kowar was untouchable before he got the call. I mean, you couldn't hit this guy for nothing. Then he gets to the majors, and it is it. I mean, bad would be a compliment compared to what he was able to do when he got to the majors. So, although I believe with Kudrina and Mazzucato, the talent is there, they've got the body to be starters. Mazzucato's got the secondary stuff to be a starter. Kudrina's already showing the velocity to get there. It I'm just concerned on what the Royals are going to be able to pull out of these guys. And I think that's ultimately what's going to tell you where they're going to be. Um, if they were in a better organization, Rays, the Astros, even the Mets, I would feel, or Miami, I would feel very confident, and they would likely be ranked a lot
mhm.
higher. It would have been an argument to put them up in that Prado, Melendez range, but I just don't know with the Royals, man. I really don't.
Yeah. So Kudra, he's usually sitting around 95, topping out at 97 with his fastball. You're right, primarily a fastball type of pitcher there, but he does have a slider, high 80s. You do worry because we've seen a lot of folks, with that really, high spin, fast slider and the movement that does come with that ends up putting a lot of wear and tear on an arm. And in an 18-year-old, you do have to take that into consideration. The changeup is developing well, which is a good sight to see with a lot of these high school arms. They usually take a little bit longer. Kind of what you were alluding to with Frank Mazzucato, just to give the stats on him. A left-handed pitcher, 18 years old, 6'3", 175 pounds. First round of the 2021 draft, taken 7th overall. Just like you alluded to here, the fastball is still somewhat developing in terms of velocity wise, but a very sharp break curveball, a decent changeup to be able to start with, a 3 pitch mix for both of these pitchers. Going to take some time to develop, of course. And the guys that we are seeing in the majors right now in Bubik, Koar, Lynch, and Singer for that matter, all college arms being drafted in 2018. So, we haven't necessarily seen, like you said, the high school arm developed and pushed through the system in quite some time in Kansas City. So I think that this is, where they're going to be trying to work on that pitching development. Now, with that being said, when we did this system the year prior, we did applaud them for a lot of the work that they did in terms of pushing up some of these pitchers, getting their pitch mixes working in the minor leagues. Now it's a matter of can they do it with these young guys, and how does that translate to the major leagues? So we'll
Mhm.
take a look and see, as time goes on, what we can end up finding from there. But Matt, I'm going to move ahead here. We're going to get to your number 8 prospect that you have here in your awesome system right up here. It's going to be Nick Lofton. Um, Nick Lofton is a shortstop by trade, 23 years old, 6'1", 180 pounds. He was taken in the competitive balance round A, the 32nd overall pick in 2020. Matt, I will say this. Of all these prospects that we've been seeing in Kansas City, there's something I have been noticing. They love some 6'1" prospects. Almost every single
Mm-hmm.
one of them are 6'1". So what can you tell me about Nick Lofton?
Well, first off, I'd like to start off by saying the 2021 season was a slight disappointment for me because I would have preferred a more aggressive assignment for a guy who was already coming out um, as a college bat. He did not disappoint at the 20 for the 2021 season, but had these numbers been replicated where he played at Double A, he likely would have been moved ahead of the arms ahead of him based off proximity, but also seeing these numbers against much more competitive pitching. Those guys who are mixing in who can locate and mix in a lot of their secondary stuff a little bit better. So with that being said, Lofton had you know he had a 10 home runs, 11 stolen bases, a very respectable walk rate of 10.2. That's what you want to see. A fantastic strikeout rate of 14.6. And, a 289 average with 373 OBP across 90 games. Now, if you kind of extrapolate that out to a full season, which is about 150 games, you're probably looking at about 18 home runs, 18 stolen bases, and although that plays, I just don't know if it's a guy. It's almost like a Gene Segura, current day Gene Segura type, and that doesn't really move the needle. He's just kind of a guy you put at your middle infield, and as kind of a rotational piece. I think Lofton's got a lot of ability. I would have liked to see him pushed much more aggressively this year than what he was. Given his history. I think he could be a good everyday major leaguer, and a kind of sort of fantasy relevant. But I think the problem that we're going to see here is I don't ever see Lofton having a place to play in the major leagues. Again, this is that talent stacked up right there at the majors. In terms of age, who's going to be knocking on that door. He's a second base shortstop, middle infielder. They're not his abilities and his ceiling are not high enough to move off any of those guys. Mondesi, uh, you know, Mondesi, Witt, Nicky Lopez. I just don't see him ever being able to push those guys. So, kind of with that being said, although I think he's going to be a just fine player, I just don't ever see him dawn in the Royals blue, man. I really don't. I think he's ultimately going to be a trade piece to get them, to get them that next piece, like an outfielder. That'll be the one thing throughout the system you don't really see a lot of, is there's not a lot of outfield depth. Now, could he shift to the outfield? Yeah. And be, an everyday outfielder? Yeah, but I just don't see his production ever
A
reaching,
fantasy
you know,
relevant.
fantasy relevant. And it gets worse if he moves off of second base and into the outfield. He just kind of becomes a dude.
Yeah. And I mean, he could be a super utility type. I mean, I know you and I were talking about him today as a very similar Ben Zobrist type. Not quite to that Whit
Mm-hmm.
Merrifield in terms of stolen bases, but a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of pop. 22 doubles on the year, 90 games. You like seeing that, but yeah, I mean, just not a whole lot in terms of real fantasy upside. I think he's going to be a very good everyday or like a real life player. Just don't know if it's going to
Mm-hmm.
translate into fantasy. Um, so
And I think Zobrist is probably the best name to throw out
mhm,
there, because when you look at Zobrist as some of his best years, 2012 was probably one of his best seasons. He had a 270 average, a 377 OBP, 20 home runs, 14 stolen bases. Prior to that, he had a 10-24 season. He had a 2020 season. So I think that's probably the best comparison. And Zobrist has had a very respectable career. He was a part of that World Series, winning team with the Chicago Cubs. So, that's not any disrespect to Nick Lofton. I just don't see a point in anything less than a 15-team league where Nick Lofton is a dude. And I really just don't see that happening with the
yeah,
Royals. I really don't. He's gonna get pushed into that Jed Jerko with the Cardinals and Padres style role. And I'm not saying in terms of power, I'm just talking about all right, well, we lost, we lost our second baseman due to, whatever. Let's just throw Lofton
Greg
in there.
Garcia
And I
type.
think, unfortunately, yeah, I just think that's, Yaro Munoz. I just think that's just what he's ultimately going to be. And I just don't really see a point where you're like, yeah, let me go get Nick
I'm
Lofton.
with you there. Moving on to your number 9 prospect that you have here. This is a guy that you and I were very, very excited about last year whenever we did this system write up. And, unfortunately, we'll get into it with the breakdown here, what happened this year. But your number 9 prospect here is Jonathan Bolin. He's a right handed pitcher, 25 years old, 6'6", 240 pounds. He was taken in the second round of the 2018 draft with the 58th overall pick. What can you tell me about Jonathan Bolin?
Well, whenever you sit here and you look at Jonathan Bolin, there's a current major leaguer that looks a lot like Jonathan Bolin if he could strike somebody out, and that's Bailey Ober of the Minnesota Twins. He's got the same size. He doesn't walk. He has great control and command. His ERA has done nothing but continue to improve. Um, with him, there's two things working against him. And it really just breaks my heart with this kid because he was a college arm. We just lost him for all of the 21-22 seasons. He will not likely make a competitive appearance until the late part of the 2022 season. And even then, I could see them knocking him back down to a high A. I don't see them, getting Bolin back. And he's currently 25 years old. I don't see them getting him back and throwing him into that competitive, that competitive double A range. I mean, you're talking about a guy who at his peak has been graded out at 60 grade command. And he features a three pitch mix that I think is actually probably graded pretty low in terms of how it's viewed in a lot of circles, and that's a slider changeup fastball. He's not a guy that I think is going to blow you away in terms of his velocity. He's just a guy that has pinpoint control. Almost like a George Kirby s type. It breaks my heart that we're not going to see this kid because I think he ages out long before he gets to the point where he's making a competitive start for the Royals, and it could push him into a Danny Duffy style role where he bounces back and forth between starting and the
Yeah.
bullpen. And I think that's a complete disservice to his ability because he's just a guy who prevents runs. He prevents base runners. And prior to him being lost for the 2021 season, he made 4 starts. He was 24 years old. He was walking batters at a 159 clip, which was his highest since his debut in 2018, striking out 13.24. And prior to that, he was striking out right at 9 to 9.5 batters per nine. So, I think this is, could ultimately be one of those things where it's the story of what he could have been and not what he is. But I really like the ability of this kid. You and I have talked pretty heavily and ad nauseum about guys. You want to buy into guys who just limit base runners and limit contact. And this is a guy who does that.
He reminds me so much of Alex Faedo and
Yeah.
Joey. Was it Joey Wentz with Detroit as
Yeah.
well? Same
And
guys.
Joey Cantillo as well.
Joey Cantillo.
Yep.
Guys who are a little bit on the older side had to have Tommy John. Their star kind of fades a little bit. I'd still
Mm-hmm.
go out and buy this guy because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing: even if he comes back at 26, even at 27, I mean, Degrom ended up coming up doing this, and I'm not saying he's Degrom by any means, but we're seeing some of these older pitchers be able to get a chance in the major leagues, and
Mm-hmm.
be able to try to pick it up and just go from there. I mean, he's got the stuff to be able to do it. Good sequencing. Here's the thing. So he doesn't have a massive amount of pitch mix, but the sequencing is good, and that's what really does help him, kind of figure out what he's doing long term there. So, I really do like that you had him in here, regardless of the injury. So I like it. Going on to your number 10 prospect here to finish up your rankings here. It's Michael Macy. He's a second baseman, 23 years old, 6 foot, 190. He was taken in the fourth round of the 2019 draft, 109th overall. One of our streamers actually gave a shout out to him in the season for us to kind of keep a look and an eye out on. And I'm so happy to be able to see this here in your top 10, Matt. What can you tell me about Michael Massey?
Well, When it comes to Michael Massey, he's a guy that I knew very little about, and that's kind of a common occurrence with the Royal system for me, just because it's not a system I've paid a lot of particular attention to. But when you sit here and you look, he is it's just like the Nick Lofton thing. I would have liked to have seen a much more aggressive assignment with him being 23 years old. But you're talking about a guy who he in 99 games, so right at we'll call it 100 games, which is 2/3 of what I consider a full season in the majors. 21 home runs, 12 stolen bases, a 289 average, a 351 OBP. He had a total of let's see, right at 50 extra base hits last year, and that's what you really want to see. Would I've liked to have seen it at 22 or 21 years old, and we'd be having a totally different conversation? Yes, 100%. And those numbers at 21, 22, that leads you to believe he's probably going to push to be a almost like a Chase Utley type if he's doing that at 21, 22. But, but he's doing it at 23 at high A. So, and he's not a young 23. Before the season starts, he's likely going to be 24 years old. So he's older. So when it comes to, Michael Massey, this is yet another player like Nick Lofton. I don't necessarily see him donning the Royals colors. And if he does, he'll be used in a super utility role. But his ability with a 7.5% walk rate and a 15.5% strikeout rate, his ability to, be an effective, a guy who impacts the game is there. I just don't see him being able to punch through with the amount of depth in the system. If he was in a system like the Texas Rangers, where depth is a little bit lacking, in my opinion, or the Angels, I think you're having a different conversation. But when you have a team that's looking to turn that corner with the amount of talent that they have in that infield, I just never see a player like Nick Lofton or Michael Massey being more than a super utility bench bat kind of guy. If you see him get moved off, I would buy in immediately. Kind of like how you and I were talking, I think it was Luis
Yeah.
Urias, when he got moved up to uh, Milwaukee. You and I were looking to buy in pretty heavily for that, and I think this would be that kind of play that I would make. Outside of a 20 to 30 team league, I just don't see a situation in which Michael Massey is going to be a guy that I go after. But in those style leagues, that's the kind of depth you need to be everyday contender or every year contenders in those
I
leagues.
like that. I like that a lot. So Matt, just refreshing what we talked about today. Going through 1 through 10 here. We talked about Bobby Witt at number 1, number 2 Nick Prado, 3 MJ Melendez, number 4 Vinny Pascantino, 5 was Ace Lacy, 6 was Ben Kundra, 7 was Frank Mazzucato, 8 is Nick Lofton, and number 9 is Jonathan Bolin. Number 10 is Michael Macy. I tell you, you did a fantastic job here on this Kansas City Royals system breakdown. Now, if any of you guys are aware of what we're doing here, we usually end up doing the 1 through 10 write ups. We do 11 through 30 rankings to be able to give you some more targets that you can be able to go after in some of your deeper dynasty leagues and be able to help you out there. But what I do always ask our moderators to do whenever they're writing up these systems is be able to pull 2 guys that they believe could be risers for not only, being able to make the top 10 next year on this list, but also be able to make a contribution potentially to the major league team in the upcoming year that we can be able to target. Matt, who are 2 guys that you're kind of highlighting here today?
Well, my first guy I'm gonna talk about. He is he's 21 years old, and he split his season last year between the low A and high A, and it's a guy named Michael Garcia. You're talking about a guy who collectively between the two levels, he's a speed guy. He had 4 home runs, so that's not that's not going to jump off the page, for you at all. But if you look at it, he was able to steal 35 bases in 41 attempts. Uh, through high A and double A. And Rick, you and I generally take the minor league stolen base numbers, especially anything at low A, with a grain of salt. But he did continue to run as he moved up to high A. So do I believe that speed is like a Whit Merrifield S type where he can steal 40 bases? No, but I could easily see him being able to bag you 25 to 30 bases a year. He was able to muscle over right at, let's see, 32 extra base hits across those 100 games. So, there is a chance that he could reach another level of power. At 6 foot, 145 pounds, this kid is a rail. So if he's able to put on some more good weight, I could see him being able to be like a 12 to 15 home run guy at the peak of his career, while also being able to bag you right at 25 to 30 bases. And I don't care what style league you play in, that plays every day. Now he is still, he's right at he'll be 22 going into the season. He'll likely pull double A. Another guy who may not ever play for the Royals, but he'd be a good piece for an organization that likes to run. And so I could, an organization that likes to run and could really use some positional depth is somebody like Miami. So I could see him being moved to somebody like that in a possibly a pitcher swap. And if that's the case, I'd be buying him up everywhere. Currently, he's 30 team relevant. Anything smaller than that, then you're really just banking on upside. But he's a guy who I would be buying in at the low cost because people really aren't paying Michael Garcia any attention.
No, I like that. That's a great deep dive to be able to get a good target. One I just want to highlight real quick. Of course, you knew I was going to have to do it. Zach Hake. Come on. Got to be related, right? Maybe? I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, Zach Hake.
I mean, you ever seen that movie Saving Private Ryan?
There's that. No, 25 years old. He's a right-handed pitcher. More than likely, he's going to end up being a reliever long term. Dealt with some shoulder issues this year that kept him out for about 6 weeks. But this is a guy that's got some great strikeout stuff, good reliever type of mix, good for deeper dynasty leagues. Fastball, slider, changeup type here. Good target for some of these deeper dynasty leagues, 20 team, 30 team. But you knew I had to make this mention, Matt. I wasn't going to get out of the Kansas City Royals without mentioning my boy Zach Hake.
One can only hope.
Next year, maybe.
Next year, maybe.
But anyway, Matt, you did a fantastic job on this write-up, sir. I really appreciate you doing this. And, of course, it's always fun to be able to talk baseball with you. Make sure that you guys subscribe to the podcast, rate and review. It really does help us get our name out there into the industry. If you're not following us on Facebook, what are you doing?
Watching Saving Private Ryan.
That's it. So join us on Facebook. We got a private and public page. Follow our work that we do on there. And, of course, like I said, check out our Patreon page. It's fun. The Discord channel is where it's at. I will tell you this. It's great to be able to go on there and talk with us. You can talk with us directly. I know with a lot of our guys, Mike included, shout out to you, Mike. We're always answering different questions, scenarios, trade advice. I mean, almost anything that you can have. It's a lot of fun. A lot of fun on there. Good group of guys. So from all of us here at the Weekly Streamer, we hope you guys have yourselves a great baseball week.